Hello there, and today we're going to talk about exploring the planet Mars. Now, when we talk about exploring the planet Mars, we usually, the first thing that usually comes into mind are the rovers, the the mobile robotic explorers on the surface of Mars, which actually began with the Pathfinder rover, which was part of the Pathfinder mission and the Pathfinder lander, which landed on Mars sometime in 1997. This was followed by the larger twin rovers, Spirit and Opportunity, which both landed sometime in 2004. Now, there is a new rover on Mars right now, and everybody knows it as Curiosity, but it's also known as the Mars Science Laboratory. So they get more media attention, these rovers, and we forget that there are actually other spacecraft on Mars, but they are actually not on the surface of Mars. They are orbiting Mars. Some of them are active, and some of them are actually already out of service, or their batteries have run out, so they're no longer active. So let's take a closer look at these objects. So here's Mars, and I'm going to turn on markers to show where they are. They're the names and markers. So there's quite a lot of them out there. There's another one over there in the distance. And to show you their orbits, I'm going to turn on the orbital trails. So let me go over them one by one. Up there we have MGS, or the Mars Global Surveyor. Then below the MGS is one called Maven, which is one of the more recent Mars orbiters. Then you also have the MRO over here. So the MRO stands for Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. And over here in the backside of Mars, going up, is the 2001 Mars Odyssey spacecraft. And over there, quite a distance away, is MOM, or the Indian Mars orbiter, which also recently just arrived. And if you look at these orbiters, you would immediately notice that some of them orbit Mars at a relatively lower altitude, just like the MRO and the Odyssey. Maven is orbiting Mars using an elliptical orbit, where sometimes it puts it in a low altitude, which is the periapsis, and here is the apoapsis in this side. Maven is now reaching its apoapsis, and MGS just passed its apoapsis, and now it's going down its orbit and getting closer to Mars again. And MOM has the most eccentric of the orbiters, has the most eccentric orbit. And you may also notice that most of the orbiters seem to be orbiting Mars in a polar manner. This means that the plane or the orbit goes mostly up and down from one pole to the next pole. So it sort of orbits the polar side of the planet rather than equatorial. So the reason behind that is this orbit allows for better mapping of the surface, or scanning of the surface of Mars, because once the spacecraft goes over the poles, the planet Mars itself would rotate beneath it, so that when the spacecraft comes to its next orbit, it's now scanning another longitude or area of longitude below it. So that's the reason why polar orbits are very useful for exploring spacecraft. Now you might notice that the Indian Mars Explorer has more or less a more conventional, well, not necessarily equatorial, but the plane of its orbit is closer to equatorial compared to the other orbiters, which are mostly NASA orbiters. And this is because this is India's first attempt to actually send an orbiter to Mars. So it's quite a feat, and they chose an orbit, I believe, which even though with the limitations of their equipment, allowed them to orbit Mars, even though they haven't actually commanded the spacecraft to do a polar orbit. And all of these spacecraft are actually still active except for MGS, the one I'm pointing at right now. MGS, the Mars Global Surveyor, its batteries have run out, so it's no longer active. So as you can see, aside from the rovers, which are now actively exploring the surface of Mars, I believe 2 of them are also inactive. Pathfinder is no longer active, as well as Spirit. But I believe Opportunity, the rover, is still sending back images, and the larger one, the newer one, which is Curiosity, is also sending back more data. So that's it. That's my simple video showcasing the orbiters, the other lesser discussed or lesser known explorers of Mars, the satellites, the artificial satellites that we placed there to actually explore Mars and study Mars further. So that's it for this session, and I hope you learned something from it.